Welcome, Brian.
Hello.
It's funny because we tried to, do this recording, I don't even know, probably a couple months ago. And we talked for like 2 hours. And I went back and it was so like from like whatever recording. And I was like, damn it. But whatever, because people were wanting me to talk to you. And, I had a lot of people say like, oh, I didn't know that about your brother, that he does, construction and you had a background in psychology and, so interesting. And I was like, yeah, I need to have him on because I really do think a lot of people would like to hear from you and all your thoughts. And I got kind of back into Facebook and I don't know what like algorithm I fell into, but like all of like my old friends or, people from like high school have started to like friend and everything. I'm like, oh, this is interesting. Like, like, how do I feel about this? And, but it's been great. Like some people have actually messaged me and said like, hey, how are you? And I was like, oh, that's really nice, and, but I think, they know you, but, haven't probably seen you or heard from you in forever, the same as me.
I think I'm like a ghost from our hometown.
Yeah.
I don't even know how to like relate. I think that idea of going onto like a social media platform and having people from my past, like it's kind of wild. I almost feel like not that I'm running from that time in my life, but I'm like, that was like 10 lifetimes ago. I've like killed myself off so many times from there. Like, who am I now? And like, do I even remember these people? Or sometimes I'm shocked when people will remember me. I'm like, what? Like, how do you even remember who I was? But it is really interesting to hear people's like perspective of you at that time, because I've heard many different people's perspectives of me. I used to almost as a joke wear this Bible club shirt all the time because I got recruited into the Bible club of our high school.
You did?
Yeah,
I didn't even know we even had
because the guy who ran it was one of the wrestling coaches. Okay. And then he came to me and was like, hey, it'd be cool to have some athletes in there. And I'm like, and he's like, well, we have pizza. I'm like, all right. So then I would show up and we got this very plain printed shirt. It said Delsey Bible Club. And I thought it was hilarious. So I wore it like all the time.
Okay.
As a joke, kind of as a joke to myself. I thought it was funny. But then afterwards, people were like, man, weren't you like super religious? I'm like, no.
Oh my God, that is so funny.
Yeah. I'm like, oh yeah. Because I was pretty quiet about it.
Yeah.
But I also think that harkens back to some of the comedians that I really like Andy Kaufman and Norm Macdonald, who like, they just did jokes that were funny to them. And they're just kind of like legends because of that.
Okay,
so
yeah.
I look back, I'm like, oh, maybe I had a little bit of that in me.
Yeah.
And now it's interesting to have people go, this is who I knew you as.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, man, I don't know how far away I am from that person now.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, obviously my perspective of you is going to be different than other people's, but that's also like a fear of mine, getting back into touch with everybody. It's like, oh, I'm not the same person, and it's like, what memories do you have of me or do people have of me? And it's fine. It is what it is. And it's almost nice for myself, not to prove to anybody, but for myself to know like I've evolved, and have changed and, still have that part of me of, being crazy or, can blow up and, but just, just life. And this one guy reached out to me and I kind of dated him. I mean, I was like a teenager, so I mean, nothing serious. And he's like, how have you been? Like, what's been going on? I'm like, I don't know how to like even address that. Like, it feels like just yesterday, but it feels like lifetimes ago. Yeah. That,
it's a giant question.
Yeah. And I just answered it with like lots of ups and downs, life. And just, it was really interesting because like I said, like he was like, what do you do for a living? I see you on Facebook. Do you just make reels for a living? I'm like, oh, that would be awesome. Like, I would love to do that. Yeah. And I said, but no, and he asked me like how I got into my job. And, I was telling him like I'm just burned out from it. I want to move on. And he's like, well, what would you do? And I was like, I want to do podcasting. And he's like, how do you make money from that? And I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know. I
that'll
said,
be figured out.
yeah, I said, it's just more of like just doing it. And if it's meant for you, it will be, for you. And even I look at it too of like, okay, well, maybe this isn't something that pays bills, but maybe it helps me to get my story out to people, and that's healing for me and maybe healing for others. And that is my work, right?
Yeah.
To not actually make a living from it, which I, hope to, or some way, but more a deeper reason for why I choose to do this.
Yeah, connection to like how your energy is spent. And then Joseph Campbell said, follow your bliss and the universe will open doors where there were once walls. And that's true. That's part of like the leap of faith that we take. And for some of us, it's more undeniable than others. And sometimes that's a harder journey for whatever reason. I've always had that thing that's like, well, I just feel like I have to do this thing against other people's logic and reason of what I should be doing. Like, obviously I took like a path of getting a master's degree in clinical psych. So then the next logical step would be like to continue a career as a therapist and go on and build that. But that wasn't in the cards for me, and looking back later, that this is before I knew anything about astrology. It happened. But then you look back, I'm like, oh, that was my Saturn return. I was right at that age. I was like 29 years old. And I just like completely threw the grenade on that.
Yeah.
And then did something else that was like kind of like that, and teaching at a juvenile detention facility, and then moving onto like a high school and coaching wrestling, which is still like holding on to this other part of my life until I eventually gave that up and went back into manual labor, which was actually like completing the circle for me of starting with our father and pretty much our entire family being in the trades, and then going back to that and saying, oh, this is actually more like my style, because I'm gonna use my body, and I feel good using my body. I'm gonna dispel some of these myths that working in this way is actually bad for you. It's not. Sitting inside a room is not good for you, and you have like a real connection with nature when you're outside. People complain about the weather a lot in the trades, and I love it. I love being outside in the winter and in the summer. And I mean, I struggle more in the summer, but like I have an understanding of the seasons and like more of a connection to what I see as like truth when you're outside and in the elements a lot.
Yeah. And I really want to get into, how just your journey. But you touched on Saturn return, and I always like to, for people who don't know, like what Saturn return is and the importance of that. And, Saturn goes around the Earth. It takes 30 years, right? To
like
make
28 to 30 years. Yeah.
So they say like Saturn return, when Saturn returns back to your natal house.
Yeah.
In those 28 to 30 years, Saturn kind of comes around and asks you, or, doesn't ask you, but you ask yourself like, okay, is this, or it's giving you like a reflection, an ability to reflect on, am I on the path that I really need to be on? And if you're like, I always look at it like where I put myself, where I was at my Saturn return was I just met my husband, my ex-husband then.
Yeah.
And knew it wasn't right for me. But I almost like to think like Saturn's like, okay, like, you want to keep going on this track, or do you want to separate? And I'm like, nope, want to keep going on this journey. And Saturn's like, okay, see you in 30 years and let's see where you're at then. Right. And then, life happens obviously, but it's those like, little milestones in your life where, you make decisions, and which we always make decisions, and everything. But like, it's like that turning point of like, I don't even know, like really going into that adulthood, right? Of like, how do you support yourself? Who do you want in your life? Where do you want to see like that next time period move into? Because I really think like those 30s are when you really start to move into your adulthood, like who you really are. I mean, we're always evolving and changing, but I look back at my 20s and I think, holy fuck, I don't know, how did I even like live in that? Like, how did I even make it out of that time alive? And just all the, foolish decisions I made. But like when you're in your 30s, you start to like understand your surroundings much more better.
Yeah, that's the idea of like Saturn, who's Kronos, who's the timekeeper, who's represented by the Grim Reaper. And the idea is like the myth would be as you descend through the seven spheres, Saturn being the seventh sphere and the outside ruler.
And the seven spheres are like the planets, right? That we go through to incarnate here on Earth.
Yeah, yeah. And then obviously like Saturn, has the rings, but in the seven spheres, he's the outside ring. He's the lord of the rings. He's the last one that you have to go through to get out of here. And so the idea is that when you hit Saturn, that's where you first make your agreement of how much time you're going to spend here. And then what you're going to do. And the idea is that, okay, well, you got the first 30 years to figure it out and get some experiences under your belt. And then I'm going to come around and I'm going to come knocking on that door. That's the Grim Reaper coming knocking saying, hey, like there's time here. This isn't a forever place. So time to get started on this next journey. And then, you have your midlife crisis, which is like almost like halfway between your two Saturn returns from 30 to 60.
And isn't that too when the North nodes get activated?
Yeah.
Which is kind of like it helps you. The North node helps you like with your destined path, your purpose. And we've talked about this before. Like when you have that midlife crisis, it's like your soul knowing you are on the right path or you're not, and then like just not knowing if you're not like aligned or you don't know what you need to do. Like people just do like crazy things, right? They and I'm just like thinking like they buy that sports car, or
the archetype of the man going through a midlife crisis because he's trying to exoterically fill a void that's inside of him, but he's so ingrained in the system that he can't really like give it up. So he's trying to like reclaim some of that youth or get adventure, right? Because we're here for adventure, we're here for drama, and if you are so ingrained in this system, then
like the material world
and this earthly realm and society, you're gonna fill that drama void by watching reality television rather than going on your own personal adventure and all the drama that's going to be filled in there. But we actually do the opposite because we're taught to like, don't do that. Stay safe, stay comfortable.
Yeah, have a job that you have insurance,
security,
and a 401.
That's right.
And stay with all the things that you really don't need.
That's exoteric security. That's not even real, and we see that all the time. It's going away. Your true security is like your integrity and that like you moving towards your path and you having faith that if I go towards what speaks to me, then I'll be taken care of. And I don't know, that's worked out pretty well for me. I feel like I don't have much like earthly things to show for stuff, but like I'm never in a position that like feels well, I say like feels wrong because I'm such a feeling person that I definitely do get like intuitive hits of like which way I have to go. But I never feel like I'm on the wrong path. Even when I go through like my waves or like my death and rebirth, I'm never on the wrong path. Which makes me question you. You said that, and during your Saturn return, that's when you met your ex. But I have a feeling that you're saying that from a place of going, oh, I wasn't listening.
Correct.
To that thing.
Yeah.
But could it be the opposite? Could have been that coming around saying like, hey, this is the way you need to go. Because we have this idea of, oh, when I go the way that I'm supposed to, it's all sunshine and rainbows.
True.
And it's not.
True.
It is often not.
True. And I always think too, I believe before we come on this earth that we decide like what our lessons are going to be for our biggest soul growth. And that helps me to be like, just being in my 40s and going through a divorce and having 2 young children. And this is not the way I pictured my life, but realizing like, but this is what I needed for my soul growth, and for me to understand and for me to teach things to my children and, to break cycles, right. Of like bad marriages, like, my ex and us too, had parents that probably should not have stayed together and stayed together. And wanting to change that. And not saying that I wanted mom or dad to not be or to be separated or anything. And there is no wrong or right, in that. But wanting something different for my children and myself, but that does help. And I do like that. So I accept that. So when Saturn came around at 30, it wasn't that I failed. It was more like, this is
your path.
This is my path.
Yeah.
I like that. But then, okay, so then Saturn comes around again, if you make it to the age of 60-ish, and it kind of asks you again.
Yeah, because then at that time, naturally you ought to be moving into like a mentorship role for people. And think about like the hero's journey, which is a circle, which is just like the astrology wheel, right? Like you go through your journey and then you come out and you have tales to tell. And then on your journey, you meet all these different characters along the way. And some of them are mentors, some of them are enemies and opponents. And then you come around and just realize everything's inside of you the entire time. But then you play these characters, for other people as well, right? So as much as like, I can be like a mentor or a source of knowledge for people, I can also be an opponent and an enemy to people too. It's just like how we interact, and then how we each like deal with those interactions, and then transmute those into like our greater selves. As part of the great work. So
like the story of like the labor of Hercules. Like he goes through the astrological wheel and conquers these things and learns lessons, and comes out. I haven't gotten to the the end of it, right? But he comes out, but then you just got to go.
You go through again.
You go through it again.
There's no end.
Yeah,
it's constant. Yeah, and the whole point's just integration, right? Like self-realization and then self-transcendence, which is, I have a little different thoughts on the astrology wheel, whereas like I kind of see it as the default programming of our characters. But then I see issues when we start over-identifying with certain aspects of our chart, because to me, the attachment to anything just, it makes us stuck. It just puts us in this box and we're not willing to like let it go. And then we start identifying with it. And then when we identify with things, then any ideas that are outside of what we believe then becomes attacks on us personally, because we have an identification with that thing. So for me, starting astrology, well, I guess in my journey, having psychology first was hugely important, and like not only like learning about psychology, but also going through my own like psychoanalysis for like many years, like 5 to 7 years. I was like in my own therapy, and then coming out and then going on my own journey, kind of giving all that up, and then like literally going and living in the woods in a tent for a while. And then through that, just through my intuition, at one point I remember telling a guy like, yeah, dude, I got all these weird books and crystals now. I have no fucking idea what's going on. And then he leaned over, he's like, we got crystals too, him and his wife. And I'm like, oh, okay. And that's why we're meeting, because we're on this like weird journey trying to figure it out. Then coming to like my own conclusions about myself, along with the help of some books that were like synchronistically in my path, then finding astrology and going like, oh, these things that I was initially thinking were like pathologies in me and issues are like clearly represented here in the chart. And I just have to figure out the higher and lower expressions of these things. And then that journey evolved to, I have to become more than just these things, because this is my default program of my character, which is important to know that I'm going to default back to these energies when I'm not super conscious of them. But really, I'm this entire wheel, and I have to integrate every part of it. So if there's, you see it in the astrological or spiritual community a lot. They'll be like, oh, well, I struggle with Aries. Aries people are like the worst. Or for me, it was like Capricorn was difficult for me. I would run into people who had Capricorn. I'm like, man, this is like a real difficult energy. I might look at my chart and I'm like, well, where's this part of Capricorn in me that I'm just not integrating? And mine's in my third house of communication, and which to me is it continues from the second house of the voice and being like an authoritative communicator. I might use my voice. Why am I not speaking my truth and doing so in an earthly, expansive way? Because I also have Jupiter in there as well. So it's like kind of almost like coming out of the clouds of all this like wateriness that I have, and then bringing it down to earth, and actually like making sense of things to other people, and not just being this effusive speaker, which also we talk about that, like that part of spirituality annoys me when we make our voice like this and we talk like this, and it's like that stuff kind of annoys me. Just speak with the trembling voice if that's what you have, and make it real and make it relatable. But then I realized too, in going through that I've always had those qualities. I've always made metaphors out of things. Always seen like the earth and nature as a metaphor for life, and then so I really started to bring in that Capricornian energy, and understanding it. And in that, like the last 3 women I've dated have had Capricorn moons, and I've gotten like progressively better with that and understanding it and understanding the difference in mine, because that's like opposite my moon in Cancer, and just understanding like, oh, there's some real awesome value here in this logic. And so then I go, okay, well, what's the next thing I struggle with? Where's some energies here?
Yeah, because I remember you saying to me, like, well, like my sun is in Libra, and like, so opposing me is Aries, and I don't really have anything in my Aries in my natal chart, right? So in my mind, I'm always like, I don't have anything in it. Why study it, right? And looking at things that you don't have, because I know what I have, and sometimes the things that we do have, like how you're saying, like trying to break out of this wheel, because you can use it as an excuse too. Like, I think Neptune is in like my house of like relationships, or 7th house or something like that. And, I've been told like, I'm not great at relationships. Like, it's delusional. And I'm like, well, fuck that. You know what I mean? Like, how do I want to have good relationships, and I want to have like a long lasting relationship. So like, I don't just accept that. I'm like, well, how do I change that? And what do I need from that? So it is about looking, with the astrology chart, we talk about this too, like how layered. I mean, it's just like, I don't sometimes even know where to begin to talk about astrology, because it's just so much. And when you look at, people get very obsessed on, where certain planets are and this and that. And it's like about looking about other things that you need. Like, I remember thinking like, I don't like the elements, how they break it down, like so many fire, water, air, and earth. And I was thinking differently. I looked at that chart you gave me, and I was like, oh, I actually don't have a lot of fire. And I was like thinking like, okay, like how do I need to integrate fire? And I'm just kind of actually getting intuitive hits now. It's like, I need to look at Aries, like it's kind of like my opposite, and I lack fire. So anyway, just saying, just like the astrological chart, your natal chart is a great way of really understanding yourself, and not just understanding, but using it too as a tool to help you in other ways. And it's not just astrology though either too, no,
it's one map of many. You don't need to know any of this stuff. You can just know yourself deeply. Like, who cares?
But how many people do know themselves deeply?
Oh, like a very small minority of people.
So I look at like astrology in that way of it's a tool, and there's many different tools. I'm just saying that there's tarot. I mean, for some people, or like the Bible, we talk about the Bible, and if you can really, really understand like the stories of the Bible, like how that is very helpful.
You just see past the fuckery. Is it okay if I curse on here?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. That's right. I don't even want to ask that. If you can see past the fuckery, that's like true of everything. And it's like we kind of throw the baby out with the bathwater, because of like churchianity has taken away from like Christianity. And if you look at like religion has always been used to control man. And then we say, well, then fuck this thing, or fuck this tool, or fuck this. It's all just like, it's all manipulated and whatnot. And I agree that it is like heavily manipulated, but I also think it's deeply coded, just as the Quran is deeply coded, just as, I'm sure that the Torah, which is the Old Testament, is deeply coded. All these things are deeply coded, and even I think says in the Bible, for those who have the eyes to see and ears to hear. So it's a trudging through to find any truth in anything, and taking anything on its surface, it's just going to give you that. You have to keep going. But a lot of us set up camps. Like we're in this like constant climb of a mountain through life, and we're trying to get to the top, but there's no top. You're never going to get to the top. But a lot of people will set up base camp on this certain area. It'd be like astrology. I found it. I got it right here. And I got all my information about it from these books that I read saying all this stuff, and then they really won't continue to climb high and question those beliefs that they have in astrology and what that means. And I know we've talked about this, that I think the negative reading of anything in astrology to me is unethical, the same as in tarot, because for one, you don't know that's true. You're just reading what you're regurgitating what someone wrote, and then now you're putting that thought out there for people, and now they're going to take that and think that this thing is negative, like Neptune in the seventh. Oh, you're going to be delusional, about your relationships. But also Neptune in esoteric astrology represents like the sphere of illumination. Mm-hmm. Like, so why not just take that with you? Mm-hmm. But if you have that negative concept in your mind of what this means, then you're more likely to create that, because this is all spell work that's being done. So you got to like be a very strong mind and cast out those negative things. When you look at a chart, you'll see the blue lines and the red lines, and we've been conditioned to think that red is bad, right? And those are, they're squares, and a square is considered an angle of sorrow. It's where energy kind of gets stuck. However, like we are in a place of sorrow. This is where we exist in the world. This is a sorrowful place. People die, nothing lives, everything decays. Mm-hmm. So to me, that just represents like the fact that you're here. It's not perfect, right? You have this planet squaring this planet, and this house squares this house, and like it's just not perfect. But how do you start a fire? Friction. That's what the red lines represent, friction. Mm-hmm. And you are looking to get your fire going. Okay, well then that's already the friction right there, yeah. Right? Now put some air in it. You have air, blow on that thing, right? And yeah. Then that's where your fire is going to be lit.
Yeah.
And it's creativity in these houses, because things aren't going the normal way. It's where art comes from. Right? If everything was just a simple, pretty hand drawing of your face all the time, yeah, that's great. Those are beautiful pieces of art. But what really sticks out to us is when people put things together that don't normally go together, and you're like, whoa, mm-hmm. I never thought about that. This actually is giving me feeling. This is therapeutic to me, because now this is like therapeutic to my senses. And it's those red lines in the chart, and the friction, and why is the starving artist an archetype, and people who struggle with things because they transmuted that energy. And you see that in songs. You notice some songs are just people being whiny babies and then putting that into music. And some of them, they could be talking about the same thing. You can tell they've been through it and they transmuted that. And now they put this into like a song that it's like moving and mm-hmm. touching. And you're like, oh, they've done the alchemical work. And that's what this is an expression of.
Yeah. And one thing when you were saying too about like, the negativity of anytime, you read or you're listening to like tarot reading or astrology and they put negative stuff out there, it's not good and it's damaging. And not that everything has to be rainbows and unicorns, right? But mm-hmm. like, we don't have to be like fear-based on it or put fear out, right? Because mm-hmm. I always like Chris from Minnow Pond, who does the tarot readings on YouTube. He says that a lot. He's like, look, if you just always followed astrology and tarot, he's like, you never leave your house. You'd be afraid to do anything.
Yeah.
Another thing I really like that he said too is like he goes around in the corners and gets all the cobwebs out. Mm-hmm. When you're talking about like the corner and the angles, mm-hmm. How just like trapped energy can get in there. He said like he'll go around his house and get cobwebs out. And I was just on my bed, and my bed has like the canopy bed, and I was like doing something, and I was like, oh, look at that spider web. I was like, get out of here. And it was like on like the angle of it, mm-hmm. And I was like, no, clear that out of here, Or like when you sage, they say like to really get into like the corners of your house mm-hmm. to like clear out that, energy of it. But anyway, just
and that's not always bad too, because you look at like the Masons, and they were big on doorways, and doorways are squares, right? Like I don't agree that houses should be these boxes that we have. I think that was kind of like either a lowering of consciousness or a weird an agenda that was put in to live in these angles of sorrow. However, I'm a carpenter, and we hang doors, and it's very important that they're square so that they work correctly. But a doorway is a transition space from one energy. You don't want energy to flow out of that, right? You want your kitchen to be your kitchen. You want your living room to be your living room. You want your bedroom to be your bedroom. And then when you step out of that space, you step into another space, you step into another energy. And now that room holds that energy, and it's not all leaking into one another. It's compartmentalized. So there is like a positive aspect to those as well.
Yeah, no, it's true. I mean, we always talk about this. There's not always terrible things about anything. There's always like positive and negatives, pros and cons, lightness, darkness. There's always duality to everything and anything.
And why do we think of something as bad? Because it's not easy. So like we have to get rid of that thought that, challenging equals bad. And it's very difficult to go through life when a challenge equals bad. And that's how you're going to get taken advantage of by the societal programmers here that will make things easy for you. So it's like, okay, do I want an easy, convenient life, or do I want a real life full of purpose and passion? And one has to go through challenges. You and I were talking about this, where now I kind of live in the woods and I don't always have warm water accessible to me. So I jump in the river, even in the cold months here, or I take cold showers when they're available, or I'll sponge bath when I want to. And I don't look at that like a challenge. Some people say, oh my God, that's terrible. I'm like, I don't see it like that whatsoever.
Yeah.
Or like a bad thing. Yeah, it's a little bit of a challenge. But also it's this thing, if I'm come back from the barn and I'm like covered in sawdust and soot and everything from the work I'm doing, and it's dark out and I'm like, I don't really want to go to the river right now. And I'm like, all right, I'm going to take a sponge bath. So I heat my water up. I put my towel on the ground, I put my soap in it, and then I get naked and then I clean myself up. There's something very ritualistic about that. Something very mindful about that like you're just really going through yourself, and it's very connective to yourself. I don't look at that as like a challenge at all or see that as a bad thing, but a lot of people do, which is like concerning to me about like our society and where it's going. But that's everybody's choice. But I do see comfort, convenience, and technology for the most part leading us to continue to live less purpose-driven lives.
Yeah. I mean, totally. Even just simple social media with Instagram. I mean, and I'm guilty of this. I will scroll through my phone and, I've really tried to get disciplined with myself. Like if I scroll, I kind of tell myself, look, you're doing this for like 5-10 minutes. Or if I want to look something up on the internet, even like I was looking up essential oils, right? I don't have like 3 hours to devote to essential oil searching.
Yeah.
So I give myself like 15 minutes, half hour to try to get my information, put it down and walk away.
Yeah.
And you can really get trapped in those like those reels and those stories. And, and it is funny to me because, now that I'm more into like my Instagram has kind of changed and I'm more into like homesteading or, just slowing down. And you even have to look at those people. They make reels, right? And they're like, oh, here we are in this blanket, eat this organic orange and here's these leaves to like play with. And that's all amazing, right? Yeah. But like there's still a camera recording you. Like you're still making that. And I get it. Like you're trying to get that message out. And I do reels too. So it's not about that, but it's like, let's put a song to the back of it too. And look at this, wonderful life. And I'm not saying that it's not wonderful, right? But I mean, like, we have to live our own lives, and not just through other people. And sure, it's great ideas, but we have to like realize like somebody is setting up a phone. Like I did a reel on like mouthwash, and I'm sure other people are very more advanced at reels than I am. I think I wasted like a cup of friggin' baking soda remaking that reel, and you have to think about these people behind these cameras or their phones, whatever, making reels like the music isn't really friggin' playing, and the kids are probably crying in 30 friggin' seconds, after they eat that, so it's like, we're making this like look so perfect, but there is no perfection in life.
No, and living like the homesteading way or the semi off-grid or totally off-grid way is hard.
Yeah.
It's really hard work.
Yeah. I mean, I can't even do sourdough, so like, and we talk about that, about living, I want to get to that point. And I think for me, I'm going to be like baby stepping into that, right? Because I can't even get my garden to grow, right? And then I'm going to like move out on this land and I'm just going to magically grow all this like vegetables are going to feed me. Like it's not, it's going to be a progression and, having, hopefully like-minded individuals and people who want to live like that and share and live that community life,
Yeah. Yeah. So, I have my own podcast too. And I always said from the beginning, I'm doing it just because I like talking about the things that we're going to talk about. But the major reason I did it was just sending out the bat signal. Like I could, I really couldn't care less if it became popular.
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't care. A lot of times, I'm not saying I'm like anti becoming popular, but a lot of times that can become a curse as well, or just more obstacles to deal with. But really, I just want to put out there and say, like, we want a community, and not just a digital community, like a real community of people who actually want to not fight the system, but to disengage from the system. So those who have been through the journey long enough that realize that fighting the system doesn't do anything. There's no point to it. It just makes you part of the system. You're just giving your energy and your prana to the thing that you want to change, but it's not going to change it. It's not broken. It's working as designed. But if we really want the life that we want, it's, unfortunately, that means getting away from kind of the mainstream, forming our own stream, and kind of forming our own lives, and getting away from all the frequencies that are pumped out at us that are kind of keeping us down and in fear and divided. And it's tough, man. Even like I live out in the middle of nowhere with no cell phone service, and still find yourself in conversations about the war or whatever's going on, and I'm just like, I don't care, and I don't care if you think that I'm like discompassionate about it. Like, I'm not going to give my energy to it. I do give my energy to, like, just because of my own nature, to figuring out who the puppet masters are and who's pulling these strings. And then you got to pull yourself out of that and say, I mean, at the end of the day, they're my brothers and sisters too. And what's going on here, what kind of game is being played. And it's not to, like, hate thy enemy or even have enemies, but just kind of realize the game that's going on here, see it, be wise as a serpent, but harmless as a dove in there, and say, oh, I see it. And this is all based on, like, this is like built on a house of cards here. There's no real foundation to this, and this isn't true. And then I'm going to test my own theories, because I just see my life as an experiment. I've given up on creating a life, from the prescribed way a long time ago. I was like, well, this life is an experiment. Like, I'm just going to figure it out. And, I think taxes are bullshit and I don't have to pay them.
Yeah.
So let's see how that goes.
Yeah. I know. I'm like letting you experiment on it. So so I can follow.
Yeah, the canary in the coal mine. Yeah, I'm fine with that, because I don't have much to be taken from me. So it's all good. Like, I guess I'm happy that to have that be my role.
Yeah.
Because I can't do well.
Yeah.
If I try to be a normal person in society, then I would look like someone who can't handle life, who can't handle their shit, because I can't handle it. Like, I never could. And then after a while, I had to go through these points in my life where I, like, really debated if I wanted to keep living or not. And when I got to that point, it was like, well, here's my options. I can keep trying to do this shit and it doesn't feel good. And even though I got all the achievements and I'm doing all those things, I'm still debating not being here, by, like, through my own fruition. Or I can just, like, continue to follow this thing that's in me that maybe some people say is this pathological stubbornness that I have, which I agree with. And I agree that's not easy for those who want to be super close to me and then want me to do certain things. But that stubbornness, like, keeps me like just very resilient and keeps searching for, like, whatever it is that I'm looking for, which is truth. It's truth that I'm looking for. And it's the alpha omega. We talked about this. It's always going to bring you back to yourself. And I know that, but it, like, to me, truth is synonymous with what we call God, or nature or anything like that. So, like, if truth is my authority and that's a thing I'm constantly searching for, then, like, I'm pretty good. At the end of the day, when I die, it's going to be the same as anyone else. No one gets to take any of this stuff with you.
Yeah.
But I'm very excited for my funeral at some point.
So sick. I was wondering, you're like, I'm very excited. I was like, oh, what are you excited for, Brian?
Yeah. For my eventual funeral. Because I hope, because I've lived all over the place. I just think it would be really interesting. So if people are listening to it and you've known me, like, please come to my funeral, because I want everyone to talk to everyone about who I was at that point to them and all the different characters and roles that I've played in this life. And I just think it'd be really interesting.
Yeah.
And I hope I get to, like, be there.
I remember
to witness it.
I remember, I don't know if it was a conversation or when you moved here and we were just talking more or whatever, but you said to me, you talked about this, about like your funeral, and you have like a playlist, and
Mm-hmm.
you were like, I want to be buried like in a mushroom pod. And I was thinking like, wait, what? Okay. Like, and I remember thinking, okay, you have to give me like this information because I don't know where to like find like a mushroom pod from. And can I even do that? I remember just, thinking like, okay.
Yeah. I have some more planning to do because, they have silly rules about what to do with
bodies
for some reason. Well, I know the reasons, but they want to.
I think I remember saying that to you. I'm like, I don't think you can just be like buried like in a backyard somewhere.
Yeah.
Like I think that's like against some like laws, and which is crazy.
Yeah, it is crazy. It's been done. It's figure outable.
Yeah.
I do probably have to get on that and figure it out. I figure maybe when that comes up to me, like I really have to figure it out. It's like, oh, I know I'm going to die soon. So I probably have to figure it out. But as soon as I bought a motorcycle, I was like, I should probably put together a funeral playlist. This will probably be the end of it for me. And I accept that. And I could not get a motorcycle because I kept having dreams about it.
Okay.
It was like one of those things. And I kept having dreams that I'd be on a motorcycle and just flipping over end over end, like perfectly fine, but just rolling. And I was like, oh, I'm afraid of this. I'm afraid of getting a motorcycle. And I was like, well, that means I have to do it. Now I have to figure it out. And so I did.
Yeah. I always find it interesting. We'll talk or something. You'll tell me a story. You did it in the early when you said you were in that Bible study. And I'm like, you are my brother and I know a lot about you, but I'm like, I did not know that. Or like, you'll say something, I'm like, I did not know that. It's always like, I don't know if you find information out about me, but I'm always like, oh, I didn't know that. And wanted to touch on, your story, your background. Cause like I said, people have been interested and they're like, wait, what did your brother do? He had this and that. And I just wanted to touch on like, just our relationship real quickly of growing up. We're 3.5 years apart from each other. I'm the older sibling. And, I remember growing up with you, like you were kind of like my friend because we live in a rural area. Sometimes I have friends over. I go to school, and have friends. So when we were younger, we played a lot together, like outside. And I'm sure we didn't play together too. But I remember, always being with you and everything. But I also remember the evil, dark side of, the things I would do, which I, in my mind, just thought they were funny, like chase you around with knives or, like push you down or, tie your hands behind your back and then push you on rocks and, not proud moments, but just painting a picture of of our relationship. And then we kind of like, just grew apart the older, we got. But I always remember like some touching stories that you're like, no, I remember you would let me drive your car, or, that one time that kid like pushed you into a locker and I like went
and
to
you went after him with a tire iron or some shit. And then he apologized to me next day. And then said, your sister's crazy. Please tell her that I apologize.
So it's nice to know that, I knew that for you.
You were a senior when I was a freshman. You also like always took me out with your friends.
And I don't remember that, but I'm glad I did,
Yeah.
But then, as we got older and you also got really into wrestling and that was such a part of your life. And then you went away, to college in Vermont. And then, we kind of like just separated. We would talk occasionally, see each other at Christmas parties. And when you really think about it, we just went different courses in our lives. And then, fast forward a little bit more. And I was like, probably through most of our 20s, we didn't talk much. And then like into like my 30s, I think we started just connecting here and there over things.
Yeah.
And then I was still married and we really started to get close and just like have more conversations anyway. Like you came to Georgia, I went to Texas and had more conversations on the phone. And then right before my divorce, it's just funny when I think back, right? Like we just really ramped up our relationship of discussing a lot on the phone. Like at that point you were living in Montana and I was in Georgia. And, I always say this, you're the top 3 people who got me through my divorce and that tough time when I was just like, no, this is too hard. I think I'm just going to stay. And not that you ever said like, don't stay, but like you helped me through my emotions. And then post divorce, we still talked. And then we just were like, you were like, yeah, I want to come and be closer to you and the boys and this and that. And then you moved here.
Yeah.
And then it's almost been a year now.
Mm-hmm.
And then you moved out, like a month or so ago and did your own thing. But anyway, just wanted to kind of paint the picture of just, our relationship in general. And then you can pick up into any of that of what you wanted to and, your journey, because whatever you want to, talk about. Because I always, when I tell people, I'll tell this last story.
Yeah.
There was a time, and I was married, and we were talking, on the phone. You were living in Texas, and you were like, yeah, I moved out into a tent, and like, I'm just living like out in the wilderness, and I'm like, what, like, okay. And I remember thinking, okay, I would never do that, and like, whatever, it's your life, you do what you want to do. But I remember thinking, like, you're so crazy, like, and also like, wait, you don't want like a house or like a car or like a job. And then the more I thought about it, I was like, yeah, like, you don't want a mortgage and like a car payment and like stress every day and dumb things. And I remember thinking, like, in the beginning, thinking like, what in the world is he doing? And then at the end of it, really thinking like, oh, you have it figured out, like, that is, even though that path isn't for everybody, but what you alchemized through that.
Well, yeah, the canary in the coal mine too. Like, I don't, it was never my life's goal to like live in a tent, but I knew for me, with not having anything, starting there and that opportunity given to me, because it was on 30 acres, on $1 million property of just raw land that was sitting there. I had to like teach myself how to do things. And then, from living in the tent, I built a little cabin, and then, then got the opportunity to go and work and live inside Yellowstone Park, and was able to sell that cabin for like a pretty good profit for me at the time. And that's how I then got to Montana and the park, and the 2020 thing happened and all that. But that's just like a constant unfoldment of having a plan and starting, I think, at the ground level. I don't know what to do. I don't have these skills yet, but how am I going to get them? Well, let me just throw myself in the deep end here. Let me start in a tent, because what's the saying? Like, necessity is the mother of invention. Like, well, I need to figure out how to get in here. I don't want to be in this tent forever. It's hot as fuck in Texas, too. So it was like, out of the tent by 7 a.m. Don't go into the tent till 8 p.m. Like, find something to do with yourself while on this land. And I did a lot of psychedelic drugs at that time too, because that was like a real healing journey for me. But also figuring out how to live off grid and what to do, and how to not just survive but to thrive.
Because you had a job, like you had you were doing like some kind of like construction stuff, right?
Yeah, I was building like themed tiny houses out of salvage material, and that was a property that we did a lot of things off grid, so it really went together. It was like, it obviously meant that I go and like live with those people, and that even for a period of time they couldn't pay me, and then but I believed in them and that job so much that I stayed with them, and in that process they felt bad, and they had the friend who had that land, and they're like, hey, do you just want to move out to this land since we can't pay you and you'll have like no rent? I'm like, yeah, that'll be good.
So then what did you do for food? And
I went to the grocery store.
Okay, like you had like money for like
yeah. I mean, they couldn't pay me just for a short period of time. They always paid me. Like I got my money. It's just in between investments into that thing, and they just felt so bad at that time. And they didn't. We were very unsure of the future. But yeah, I was still working.
Because I kind of remember you telling me a couple stories. What would you do for like water, or like taking showers, or like drinking water?
Yeah, I at that time I brought it all in. There was like a well that was drilled, but it didn't have a pump or anything in it. And then just for me, like trying to get down to that water, I put like a rock on a string and lowered the string down just to see where the water level was. And it was like 300 feet. And I was like, fuck, how do I get this water out of here? So for the time being, I would just buy water, like filtered water, and bring it in. I had an ice chest. And then, so I would put ice in the ice chest for some of my food. And then when that ice would melt, I would put that in my shower bag, and I would just shower with that. And then I would like take my dishes to my shower bag with me and shower myself and do my dishes at the same time. And this was just hanging on a tree in the middle of the woods, you know, so I had a lot of run-ins with like armadillos and raccoons and stuff at the time. And it was like cold showers. And this was before I really knew anything about like Wim Hof or that this was like becoming popular. But to me, it was like, yeah, well, whatever. I feel like this is like making me stronger and less
not many people
dependent
live
on
that way.
hot water. And I love hot water. I came here last night and I was like, man, a hot shower is really, really nice.
Yeah.
Right? But it makes you understand the work that goes into that. And that's doable too. That's completely doable.
Yeah.
Off grid. There's a ton of ways in which you can do that. But for me, it's all about not being dependent on a system that I don't believe in to provide me with those things, because that becomes the carrot that dangles, and then that's going to make you trade your principles and your integrity, which I think is like the true cornerstone of masculine energy, is not to like give up your principles and integrity in order to live in the system, to be a quote unquote provider, which I see as kind of it's very compromising, you know, in a lot of ways. And how can you say that you're like a person of strong character when you can see things that are going on that aren't right and it's taking advantage of people, but then you still kind of go along with it. So that's just the path that I took.
Yeah.
But also I bought into the system too. I didn't like buy into it, but out of necessity and my own indoctrination. So yeah, I didn't have like a mortgage. I mean, I have car payments now, not a lot, but I went to school. I bought into that scam of education. Not that all education is a scam, but the amount of money that goes along with it is a complete fucking scam.
Yeah.
And the amount of debt I have from that was like so overwhelming that it's almost farcical to me. And I was like, I'm not going to do this thing where I like get into the system and do this stuff just so I can like pay this ridiculous debt off. It doesn't even like make sense that I had it. And now this is what's controlling my life. So I'm going to do that as an experiment. Of course I want to pay all my debts, you know, even if I was a kid when they sat me down in a registrar's office and said, well, sign this or, you know, pack up and head back to Jersey or whatever.
Right.
You know, I do feel like that's a little like predatory, but I made those things, so I did that. So yeah, that's like my goal was to always do those things, but I will not change what I think about life and my principles based off of, this debt slavery system that we have. And that's again, the experiment that I'm willing to go through.
Yeah.
And, you know, I don't know, whatever the consequences are.
Yeah. No, I mean, again, you're like my, what is it?
Canary in the coal mine.
Canary in the coal mine, which I don't have student debt, but I just have regular debt. But I know a lot of people who have student debt. Like it's like unfathomable. You know, you can't even like, you know, I mean, I've told you the story. Like I worked for a doctor and he said like basically a trash man does better than he does because of all the money he has to spend on student loans, which I disagree because like I said, like his wife was pregnant and she had her baby shower list and it was all Pottery Barn things, like a $1,000 glider. You know, so obviously,
well, does he want to live with trash piled around him?
Yeah. Well, yeah, we talked about this.
Because there's like this value that we put on certain things.
Yeah.
Why is the garbage man not as valuable
totally
as someone else? Yeah. Like this stuff needs to get done. It's this weird thing we have where before like money was invented, we just traded our services to one another, you know, and you would think like something like the manual labors would have been even more valued because it takes someone to be in like good shape and to have like a lot of like knowledge and skill in building things, because something like housing and shelter is so important. But now you look at how society is run, and the people in manual labor and the trades are generally considered lower on the pole, right? Because they're not smart enough to use their mind. They have to use their bodies, when it's like really the true way how to do things. Using your mind is of course amazing, but like I've been in carpentry for a while, and one of the reasons I love it is you meet so many characters there. So many. I mean, you meet people who are just, you know, on meth, and the people who are just clearly just trying to figure this shit out in life, and then you meet these like just crazy intelligent humble people. You just meet all these weird people in between, and I was always the guy that we're going to get into some weird conversations on a job site that you probably wouldn't usually get into. And I always got a big kick out of that. Or being this like littler guy, like 5'6", and then like talking to like my bosses and these dudes that are like so ingrained and talking to them about like the coffee enema that I did this weekend and I'm going to do this weekend, and just watching them be weird, or like, saying things that would otherwise be like, was this dude gay, or whatever. Cause it's like such like a toxic like environment there. And then, and just like playing on that and poking them, playing that like trickster like archetype in there, but also being who I am and people liking me, and just you see them being confused, like, but I like you and respect you, but you say things that go against my belief systems. And I just love seeing those wheels turn and then just walk away.
Yeah. No, it's true. I mean, just relating a little bit, I worked at a lumber yard for a little while. I mean, I was like the receptionist, so I wasn't like doing anything like hard labor, but yeah, I mean, it was all men. Like there was never women that came in there, and like the guys that drove the truck, the guys that ran the lumber yard, the owner, there was like a window guy, a door guy, it was all guys. It was actually me and another woman. I had very fond memories of her. She was a really good person. And, but yeah, just being around that environment, and thankfully, I mean, obviously I'm a female and people I think were nice to me. Right. But I mean, like sometimes the guys that come in there and like, yell at me and I'd be like, who the fuck do you think you're talking to? Yeah. Like, that's not how this is going to go, and, but yeah, just that environment, just a very different environment. I mean, it was like I look back and I don't want to say it was fun, but like it was
real.
It was real. And like, I could be real. I didn't have to worry about like saying something or like, oh, that you can't say that offends somebody and you're going to go to the HR department and all these things. It was just like, you dealt with it, right? Yeah. Like you had to deal with it.
Deal with it. Yeah. Yeah. And that's like, that's like a plus and minus of those places. Cause it's still one of the environments that is a non-PC culture in my experience. That's changing too, but it's still a place where people can say pretty like horrible things to one another. And there really isn't an HR. Maybe some companies pretend like they have one, but it's generally generally not.
It was like a joke, but I was like humped by the owner of the lumber company. Jeez. And like I was like, well, I got no one to go to. Just got humped by and I mean, it was a joke, and I really did not take it that way. He never ever came on to me ever, but it was just like, dear God, that would never happen, like.
Oh yeah, that never happened. But what it also does is it forces you to use your voice. There is no one. There is no mommy or daddy to come and do this. And if you do have a problem with something, if something is legitimately wrong, then say something, because we're so used to saying, I'm not going to confront this directly.
Yeah.
I'm just going to kind of go around this person and go to like someone above them, and then they'll scold them because they have this belief and power dynamics here. But like, I've never had that thought of I can't say something to this person because I'm beneath them. I've always been and I would get a fear about it, but then I go, oh fuck, that means I have to do it. So I would talk to these dudes that are 250 pounds all the time and say, hey, do you have an issue with me, or what's going on? And or like, there's different ways to solve this, and I can solve it in this way or this way.
Yeah. And the thing is too, like they're difficult conversations, just saying that, like being a female, I have a little bit of a different perspective on that. Right. But like, for instance, I'm not going to go real deep into it, but there was another issue I had at my job where I did work like in a corporation, and, I did go around and, got him in trouble, and, what he was doing was completely inappropriate. And I do wish now I could have gone to him more directly. And even though like I felt like I was dropping clues like, please stop, and there were some things I was like, okay, let's just stop talking about that, and it just never stopped. And I do think it's strange that how some people all can't pick up on things too, like this is an inappropriate conversation.
For sure.
So I don't want to get too deep into it too, but there are good things about having situations like that, but I agree on that. Like I wish I could have been stronger in my voice, because I do have a really strong voice, like, but I think it's somewhere ingrained in me or indoctrinated, like to be fearful to have those conversations, or to not be confident in myself. Like, I mean, I've talked to other women about this, like being a woman, finding myself in some situations, which thankfully I never got myself in too big of a situation, but almost felt like, with another man, And I can see how things escalate and like you don't feel like you have a voice to say no, or that no is not going to be answered, because it is indoctrinated like for women to be polite and you don't, you don't hurt people's feelings. And I'm not saying that's not like you should not hurt people's feelings, but with that in females, I think it's been indoctrinated of like you be polite, you be classy, or whatever the things are. So like when a man does come and like puts themselves on you, like you don't know how to respond. Where you have to be taught like no. Like there is a no, and you are allowed to say no as a child. You are allowed to say no.
Because I mean, power isn't limited to body size or like makeup. Just because a woman might be like smaller in stature doesn't mean that their voice is any less powerful. And then if someone like continues to go over that boundary, that is why we have that setup of a higher thing, and that is also why you have the option to leave that place. And a lot of people say, well, that's not fair. Well, leave. I mean, that's the reason why a lot of people deal with bullshit, is because they're job scared. They're afraid, if I say this thing, then I'll leave this job. Well, that's your own like slavery that you put yourself there. Like, that's not been my way, and I'm not saying that that's easier. That's understandable for everyone. Obviously, if someone has a family, stuff like that, with the whole COVID thing. Like, again, I was like very fortunate to work in construction. Like, I didn't wear a mask. It wasn't a discussion. It was like the one time I did is I asked the owner, I said, hey, are you guys doing the whole V thing? And he's like, no. I was like, good, because I'd quit. And he's like, I know. Like, and a lot of people would. So as much as we don't like those like rougher people or think they need to go, like there are a lot of them will still say like, hey, no, we ain't doing that. That's a lot of people don't like agree with the government in that way. I think I'm going off.
Well, I was going to take it back just a second about like standing in your power, right? Like, there is such a thing as job fear, right? And stuff, but there's also like, you can still have conversations with people. And like, even my like direct supervisor, like just recently something kind of happened, and nothing big, but I didn't like it. And I'm like, I don't like it. And I was like taking it home with me, and I was like playing like all these like scenarios in my head. And I was like, I need to just go and talk to them and just have a conversation, a heart-to-heart conversation about like, these are my boundaries. You know what I mean? Like, I will do this, but I'm not doing this. And this needs to be respected. And you know what? It went over really well, and it was respected. And I'm not saying that's going to be for everybody, right? And maybe that is where you're like, okay, well, I just put out something that I need, and that's not respected. Now I need to look for a job, right? But like, if you can have conversations with people and say, I don't like this or that, and then it's met and you're heard. Do you know how like much more powerful of a person you become too? And it's not about being like power struggles, like, oh, I want more power, but it's about standing on your square, and declaring what you want, and saying what you need to say. And I remember saying that I listened to like a tarot reading not long ago, and it was specific to like my sign. And I just remember her saying like, something's going to happen, and of course my mind, I take these things, and I run with them like, oh my God, what's going to happen at work? Right. But it was like, something's going to happen at work. And it was like, don't give your power over, like, stand for what you believe in. Like, when you don't stand up for things that you believe in, you are giving your power over, and don't do that. Like, stand in like what you believe
in your integrity.
Yeah.
We're so afraid of it for all the reasons that we make up in our head. And I think a lot of times too, not every time, but when you're vulnerable and you speak to someone vulnerably, that doesn't mean crying. That just means being real and authentic with how you're feeling. Like, you don't have to put a big, strong voice on to have a voice. Sometimes the voice is shaky and trembly.
Right.
A lot of times people end up yelling because they're covering up that shakiness and trembling. And then the thing that they're saying doesn't get through because it's coming from a defensive way, and it's going to meet someone else's defenses. But at least give that other person a chance to hear you in your authenticness, say what you believe. And they can do what they want with it. A lot of times we get upset, but I was authentic and I didn't get what I want. But that wasn't the point. The point was that you were authentic, and now you didn't get the response that would be like appropriate to you. So then you start looking at the other avenues of what to do. But we often skip that because we'll say, well, that's not going to go through well, or this experience here or whatever. But it's like, you just do the right thing because it's the right thing to do. Just, just try to go through life as vulnerable, but not dependent on other people validating that vulnerability, which is a very difficult lesson to go through. And I think we all just kind of go through that thing when you experiment with vulnerability. It doesn't come back to you in a good way, maybe from like a bad relationship or the family unit. And then you're like, well, I'm not going to do that anymore. But then to me, it always comes back to, well, be vulnerable, be authentic.
Yeah.
And then once that becomes like that, the truth that guides you, like you will start finding like the path and the people that do like respect that or of the like mind and will share their vulnerabilities and authenticity. And those won't always work out. I've been in a lot of relationships where it's like, hey, this is like my authentic truth about this thing. And they're like, well, this is mine. It's like, well, I can see these don't line up, or, we can part ways amicably instead of like under a bunch of like tension and anger and hatred.
Well, and I was just going to say that by speaking your truth and speaking, vulnerably and authentically, you're putting yourself out there, you're doing, you're leaving it all on the table. And exactly, like if it's met with, and like, I didn't get my way 100% out of that, you know what I mean? But it was like, okay, there's a compromise to it. Right. But if I was met with like, well, too bad, this is what you're doing. Yeah. Okay. Well, I take that back and I'm like, what do I want to do with that now?
Doesn't that scare people too?
Okay. Yeah.
Because if I say this and I get the response back that says, yeah, tough shit.
Yeah.
Now the responsibility goes back to me. Well, now I have to do something about it. Yeah. Or I can sit here and whine that they said tough shit to me and play the victim role.
Right.
Or I can say, oh fuck, I gotta go.
Right. Yeah.
Which is scary.
Yeah.
But like the leaving the job or leaving the thing, eventually you're gonna leave this body. You're gonna leave this earth. So like do the things to kind of get you used to that. So that process, because it's going to happen to everybody. Yeah. There's no escaping it. There's no getting out of here alive. There's no plugging yourself into a computer or, some people say, oh, death is, you don't have to die if you don't want to. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to call bullshit on that one. Like I'm all about the magic of our minds. But it's literally never happened.
The purpose is for you to die. Like,
purpose for you to die.
Yeah, like it's not, we're not to live forever. We're to, your body expires. And of course, your soul doesn't die. It goes on to whatever it goes on to.
This isn't our home.
Yeah.
Is my thought on that. Like, this isn't my home. I've always felt like this isn't my home. I've always felt somewhat uncomfortable here. Yeah. And for a while, that was me being uncomfortable in my own skin until I realize that like this is my home for now and my body is my temple, right? We even have these two things on the side of our heads called temples, right?
With the mind between them.
That's right. So cherish your temple, like make sure your temple's clean. Watch what you consume, watch what goes in the media especially. So what was I saying? But I've always felt weird. I've always felt alien. I've never felt super comfortable here. And that's been a real journey for me to like just get comfortable with being here. Realize it's not my home, but make the best of it and realize as much like darkness that's out there and a lot of things that don't make sense, and a lot of manipulations out there. There's also great beauty. And to me, that great beauty is it's in nature. So like, I've always had this journey of going to nature and then getting kind of pulled away from it because I'm not here to be by myself and isolated at the same time. So like I'll go to nature, get myself centered, come back into society, things will build up. I'm like, fuck, I gotta go back to nature and I gotta like release this. But to me, it's bizarre that we don't see ourselves as natural beings, and a lot of us are afraid of nature, or afraid to like go camping or something like that because we're so disconnected. And that's where I see a very clear agenda that has been carried out to separate us from nature. I spray myself with my essential oils, my thieves oil after I do jujitsu or I teach wrestling. And there's always comments that are made about it, about like being a hippie or I'm like, I'm like, dude, like this is you are from nature.
Mm-hmm.
Like you're connected to nature. Like why wouldn't you think like a natural thing?
Mm-hmm.
Why wouldn't things that are close to nature be good for you? Why it's got to be like synthesized and taken through this process and processed to the point where it's now a chemical that is toxic for you, because everything has its basis in nature too, obviously. But the further you get away from it, there's just a rule for life. The further anything gets away from its living state and from its natural form, the worse it becomes for you, because you are a natural being.
And that makes a lot of sense just with, the things I've done, like in my life, right? Of getting the chemicals out of my house. And while I still clean, I just use more, natural, and I mean, by natural, I mean like baking soda, vinegar, like very basic things.
Yeah.
And to learn from that, and it cleans my house just as really better than the chemicals, and it doesn't have that chemical smell.
Yeah.
And that just opening my mind up to so much more about, how much nature can heal our bodies, because we are nature. And I remember I've talked to this about people, and some people will be like, yeah, but I mean, like, doctors are good for some things. Yeah, sure. I mean, like if your arm is cut off,
trauma.
Emergency medicine is good.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't pass judgment on anybody for doing anything. Like I work in cancer, right? I don't judge people for doing radiation. I don't judge people for doing chemo. And I don't know if I would go those routes, because I don't know, because I'm not
in that position.
Not in that position.
It's easy to say.
Right.
Yeah.
But, thankfully I'm not. And I just keep going on with my life of trying to keep integrating more of the natural things to keep proving to myself that this is the direction. This is the way. We are capable of healing ourselves through many different modalities.
And you can avoid putting yourself in that position by by living that way.
Right. Like eating vegetables and, a clean diet. Let's just not, get into specifics, but like a cleaner diet, and, not putting alcohol and chemicals in your body, keeping your body and your mind clean.
Yeah, because we have this notion that goes around that we're the most advanced we've ever been. Then why are we the sickest we've ever been?
Yeah.
On every level, like physically, mentally, spiritually. And, then there's a lot of talk in the spiritual community of a great awakening, all that stuff, and a division between two. I don't know about all that stuff. It's hard for me to say that.
Yeah.
But it's very clear to me that the more quote unquote advanced and technological we get, like the worse we're doing.
Yeah.
Like there's never been more. And the whole, that's my thing is the mental part. So you can sit there and say, well, there's never been so much mental illness on the one hand. On the other hand, there's also an agenda to label everything as a mental illness, because if you're labeled as sick, then you can sell you a treatment, not a cure, a treatment for that, because that's what we want. We want to keep people sick, and we want to not only convince people that they're sick. We talk about those astrological energies that maybe people have, and talking about balancing them. That'll be labeled something. And this is very triggering for people to hear. And I've always had very triggering ideas on mental health and what's really going on. But this thing is real. And I'm like, well, there's not a fucking blood test for that thing.
Right.
These are still, at the end of the day, a checklist. So say there's 5 categories or 5.
Are we talking about let me just say like ADHD or something like bipolar?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And it'd be okay, well, you fit 3 of these boxes for that thing, therefore you have that thing.
Yeah.
And I question it. I absolutely question it. And they'd be like, well, we've done brain imaging and all that stuff. And it's of course there's a biological response to everything. When I laugh, there's going to be hormones and neurotransmitters that are going all throughout me. But was it the neurotransmitters and the hormones that made me laugh, or was it the event that made me laugh that my body had a biological and chemical response to?
Yeah.
So what is it, chicken or the egg? But we have been taught that it's the body, and that was one of the things in mental health that really would get me. Is it became a compassionate thing to tell people it's not your fault, it's your brain. So you're telling people it's not your fault, you're just defective.
Right.
And that just makes zero sense to me. On a fundamental level, people talk about human nature. They're like, well, that's just human nature. And I'm like, well, that's bullshit too, because that's not human nature. That's you observing what humans are like now, which we are adaptable beings, and saying, well, that's human nature because I can see that humans tend to do this thing. But to me, like, nature tells the truth. And the only thing that I see fundamental to human nature is growth.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then we'll go in attempting to grow, we'll go in all these different directions based on kind of like what's told to us. But we're always looking to grow, and we're always going towards health. Like a tree will have trauma and it'll be bent, but it continues to grow towards the light, and that's what we do too. So we're always trying to grow, and when we're in the correct environment and have the correct nourishment, then we're going to continue to do that. We're just going to keep getting better and keep growing. We can get to a society of 8 billion people on the foundation of sick people, because that's like another kind of thought that goes around. It's like, well, we know about health now.
Yeah.
Well, they didn't know about health then. Like, how do you get to this population? You wouldn't get to hear from a sick population or people who didn't understand themselves and their bodies and nature. Yeah. So it's just, to me, it's a lot of getting us away from common sense.
Yeah, and it's interesting. Well, I want to say one thing, because I don't know if we talked about that you have your master's in psychology, and you've just told me in conversation that you didn't love the way it was, what's the word, supported, or how it, how mental illness was being dealt with, right? Was, just like, okay, like, take these medications, or, you have to have all these licenses to be even talk to about these kind of people, right? And I really like that Ram Dass, what's his real name? Richard?
Alpert.
Okay, Richard Alpert. Because he was a Harvard psychologist.
Yeah, professor.
And he kind of had a psychedelic experience. Is that what spawned it? Or is that the right word, spawned? But anyway, kind of like knew like, okay, wait. Yeah, because his ego fell away from him. He watched his ego fall, and he kind of came out of that and said, oh no, there should be like a melding of like psychology, right? The science base with the spiritual base. And he tried to do that. And then Harvard basically like fired him, was like, you're out of here, And I always kind of almost compare you to him in your thought process of, it's not, when it comes to like mental health, right? It's not like either or, it's like both. And how that isn't, it isn't combined. I mean, I see, I'm on Facebook and I'm a part of like communities around here, right? I mean, it's crazy. I'll go on there sometimes and like half of like the conversations are like, hey, I was diagnosed with ADHD, or my son was diagnosed with ADHD. And I don't want to talk about, I don't care what anybody does, like whatever anybody does. But I mean, the same kind of came to me with Bo. A teacher approached and said, like, I think he has ADHD. He'd benefit on medication. I'm like, hell to the no. I'm not putting him on medication. And like, you don't know my child. I know my son, and he does not have ADHD. Does he have focusing problems? Yeah, but that doesn't mean like I'm gonna put him on drugs. And again, like, no judgment for what anybody wants to do, what's best for their child. But like, I think of it like I have a Gemini mind, right? Like I'm a Gemini rising, and my mind is like all over the place. And I mean, people have told me like, oh, you have ADHD. No, the fuck I don't. It's because I have a gazillion thoughts, and I ain't taken the time to organize any of them. And I know children can't organize that either, but us as parents have to help them. And maybe it's lessening screen time, or not being on TV so much, or sitting down with them and playing a game and helping them understand focus. And giving them jobs and responsibilities that are for focus. It's not just, well, here's medicine. It's like, and that's fine if you have to go that way, okay, or you choose to, but have you tried all the other things? Have you tried giving them less sugar, less processed foods? Have you tried those things to just see a difference?
Well, all that would require one to change their life to be less distracted by other things.
Correct.
Right? Because that's what we do. We go to a job, and the majority of people have jobs they don't like, which is just like a constant stress on them. And then they're seeking things to like relieve that stress, which is usually through like a dopamine like hit. So
like cigarette smoking,
coming home and drinking, tuning out and watching football for like 11 hours a week or whatever people do, staring at the television because you just want to quote unquote unwind and turn off, which you're not turning off when you're watching television. You're just opening your mind to whatever messages want to come through there. So
from the programming,
it's called programming.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, it's all cool. You're saying like, that's fine. People don't do it, no judgment. But like, I don't think it's fine. I do have judgment on it.
Yeah, I just don't. Yeah. I'm a person who, you know, I just don't. I don't really. It's not that I don't want to be attacked. It's I'm speaking from. I don't have psychology as my background, right? So I don't feel comfortable just speaking on what is good. I know what's good for me and my family, and I speak from that because that's what I can control and I choose.
Yeah.
But I don't have a background or that knowledge. I mean, me and you speak, and there's things that are true to me and I think make sense, but like I don't have a leg to stand on. I feel like I don't have a leg to stand on to tell anybody what to do or in that.
Oh yeah. You can't ever tell anyone what to do, but I think hopefully we get to that point you and I were talking about earlier where we stop saying, well, I'm not an expert in this and I don't, I'm just a dummy. I'm just a dumb monkey. You know, I don't know. You have to consult the people who were indoctrinated for years and went through a very specific curriculum that was specifically designed to get people to think in this certain way. But how much more evidence you need that like the allopathic like medical system isn't about health, it's about sickness.
Yeah. Because I know not everybody knows maybe what the word allopathic is. Allopathic is like Western medicine, which is kind of like our society and many other societies too that are based on, right, where they treat the symptom, right? Like that's allopathic is like it's
treat
just
and then mask the symptom, right? Like you're talking about like that teacher saying to your child, I think he has ADHD, maybe he should go on medicine. I was in the process of getting licensed to be a psychologist, and it was very clear to us that we couldn't say stuff like that because then that's practicing medicine without a license. So that like really gets my goat when I hear someone like that. You go, oh, so are you oh, if we're going to do the whole, are you a doctor thing? Are you a doctor? Because what you're doing, and I get it, it's complicated and it's not just people like the teachers are, I was a teacher too. You're taxed beyond belief. Yeah. Like it is not natural to have 20, 30 kids in a classroom and I have help and to try to do stuff. It's all bullshit. It's all designed to be shitty. So, but to then say that is, she's not saying that I care about your kid, even though she does, right? But in that statement, she's not saying I care about your child and your child's health and getting better. She's like, I need less behaviors that are difficult to deal with. Yeah. So this pill, which is meth, is a chemical restraint that will make him fall in line and do what he's told to make it easier for everyone else. And that is how the pharmaceutical industry has operated from the beginning. When the whole ridiculous wokeism stuff was going on, to defund the police, and was then getting back to like how the police started, and this was like KKK members. By the way, KKK were Democrats. That's what I was like, well, what about mental health and how this started? It was like, I mean, it didn't start like that. There used to be different treatments. There used to be like bathhouses and contrast therapy to be used, and that got taken down, and whatever. That's a whole thing. But eventually it became like Thorazine at one point was considered this miracle drug because it took all these people who were schizophrenic or whatever they called it then, hysterical and were screaming, and you gave it to them and they stopped screaming, and they were like, this is a miracle drug. But it was called the Thorazine shuffle because these people couldn't even pick their feet up, and they were like walking comatose and drooling out of their mouth. Yeah. And they're like, look at this. We've helped this person. That person is suffering. Yeah. That person is suffering. Mm-hmm. And we have this idea that a schizophrenic person is speaking in word salts and not actually saying anything. How do you know they're not saying anything? Mm-hmm. Have you sat with them and tried to figure it out and try to put those pieces together for them? Mm-hmm. Because, I mean, I went to an amazing grad school that was very anti-medical model. And we did focus on people who did do that work, people who worked with schizophrenia, and they really challenged the notion that this isn't curable, and people who like quote unquote cured it, and they and they figured out how to do it, and it's through like human engagement and figuring things out, and not just giving someone a pill. Yeah. No one's problem. And I'm not saying, God, I hate like even offering a disclaimer that like sometimes that can happen. Like I've been hit in the head a lot. I wouldn't be surprised if later on they're like, hey man, like there's something with your brain, like this is what we got right now until we can figure it out. Now I do believe that there is a natural cure to everything. Right. I do. There is such thing as brain damage, and there's also a thing that can help
cure brain damage of different whatever kinds.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's not as accessible to us too. Like
Right.
I don't have like this ultimate knowledge of every natural cure and remedy.
Right.
So sometimes you do what you got to do to relieve the suffering at the moment. But this is not built on helping people. It's built on hurting people and keeping people sick and masking symptoms. What happens when you mask a symptom? It comes out a different way. What happens when you squeeze a hose? It starts balling up. It's going to poke a hole right here. It's going to come out in this way. And it's going to come out in this other way. It's always going to come out. What I was saying before, like your problem, no one's problem is a lack of a pill. Therefore, the solution is not a pill.
Yeah.
It's a mind, body, spirit thing. It's the Trinity. So anytime we have a problem, we need to look at all those things. What's my mind doing? What kind of thoughts am I having? What am I letting into my mind? What am I consuming right now? And then your body, what are you taking in? And on that path, this is something I think about a lot lately is, I can sit here and eat the healthiest food ever, but if I'm angry when I'm eating that food, what's going in my body? What is my body doing with that? We know all the studies on water, right? In our body's water. We know how things break down, like in cymatics, like the geometrical patterns that kind of come from like when you pray or something and give love to it versus hate. So I don't care how healthy you're eating. If you're eating and you're angry and you're bitter and you're resentful, you can be eating the greatest food ever. And I still think you're getting less nourishment than someone who's eating a cheeseburger with joy. Yeah. So we were talking about scrolling before and doing all these things that are like unhealthy for us. And, it's my goal to not do any of those things. But what I try to do is just very consciously do that. If I know that I'm going to sit down, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to get a pint of ice cream. I'm going to eat this whole fucking thing right now. I'm going to do it consciously and know that I'm doing that thing and not shit on myself for doing it.
Yeah.
And then if I keep having that craving, I'm going to have to look at, hey, what am I doing here? Why am I doing this? But like, if I'm going to sit down, like, watch YouTube, because I'll do this, I'll be like, well, YouTube, that's where I listen to like all the lectures that I like and stuff like that. I'm like, well, it's just becoming another distraction crutch as well. And I also have my like trashy stuff that I'll watch on there, but I will consciously do that at night and say, okay, right now I'm just going to entertain myself and I'm letting that entertainment happen. But I'm also conscious of the messages that are getting through to me.
Well, I was going to say, I think, sure, all that is true, but I think like if you decided to watch a YouTube video, right, on whatever, right, like you are consciously like, I want to learn about this or I want to hear about this, right? But I think when you're on social media and you're scrolling, you are seeing one thing after another. Like I feel like your brain literally cannot like take all that. I mean, in 5 minutes, I could see a landfill in India burning, and I could see this chick dancing in her living room, and I can see this other lady making sourdough and showing me, her tricks. Like your brain, I feel, at least my brain, is like, that doesn't help me.
No,
it hurts me because I get off and I'm like, oh, okay, I need to write my recipe down for the sourdough. And then, oh man, that does suck about all that trash in India. Like, what can I do? And then, oh, I want to do a reel of me dancing in the living room, So for me, it doesn't help me. And then I think of all that stuff that you take in. And still, I agree, like you have to consciously make that decision. If like, okay, I'm going to go in and I'm going to get my mind blown for 5 friggin' minutes or 10 minutes, you know? How many people think about that when they open up the phone? How many times, and I'm guilty of this, I'm not speaking down anybody and I'm realizing these things about myself. How many times do I open up that phone because I have a minute of boredom and I'm sitting here? How many times do I reach for their phone and do it? Where I can't just sit in silence.
Yeah, well, I think when you look at that and you'll see that it has progressively gone from like long form to shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter things. And it's important to recognize that there's a heavy allure to that. Like I get to that too. I'm like, oh, well, a little short right there. Like, oh, that's kind of nice. And like, I'm always like, I'm teaching wrestling too. So if I can find a short on a wrestling move, I'm like, boom, boom, boom. But other things will catch my attention for sure. And what doesn't it require? Your focus. And that's what this is really about. It's a war over the focused mind, because the focused mind is a powerful thing. And in this age when we have things like the law of attraction that comes out, which is like a watered down mess, but what it's really about is holding an image of what you desire in your mind. And the longer one can do that, the more you're going to be able to design your life. So then you can kind of see that the agenda is to get that away. So I like to think, like, if I'm going to like go on there, I want to find something that's long form. Most people aren't going to sit and listen to an hour-long lecture by Rudolf Steiner or Manly P. Hall on esoteric ramblings.
Yeah.
A lot of times people just be like, well, I didn't understand what he said, so I stopped, I'd rather watch this, this video of this, this short of this person who has this nice clickbaity thing, and they're probably going to give me that same information, and maybe some of that information is the same, but really, like, you're conditioning your mind to just think in these short segments instead of like really sitting and focusing and having patience and holding images in your mind, which is, to my mind, a correct way to pray. Is using your five senses internally and holding images there, and that's how you really create what you want.
Yeah. I just heard the other day, I like this, the way this guy said this. He said, when you manifest, and we've talked about this though, like when you manifest, it's not just holding the thought, right? Mm-hmm. It's like, how does it make you feel? Mm-hmm. It's not like, I'm just using an example. It's not like, oh, I picture myself being a millionaire. How do you feel to be a millionaire? Yeah. What is it giving you? What are the things, what do you have $1 million? What does it feel like? What does it taste like? What does it hear like? Whatever, you're picturing.
Yeah.
But one thing I liked about this guy too, he was saying, I don't know how true this is, but he's like, just because a thought comes into your mind, that's not enough. He said, because he's like, I can think my fucking neighbor is a real asshole. Right. And he's like, and I can think that. Mm-hmm. He's like, but if I don't like
put action towards that.
Yes. Or like picture his neighbor in misery or like in pain or, inflicting that. He's like, you can have thoughts and not make them come alive. It's really when you put like an intention behind it and you really start like picturing it and feeling it and embodying it is when that thought becomes something different.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Because then people start getting real like shaming on themselves for having like certain thoughts.
Sure,
it's like
you
are not your thoughts. Yeah. I question if we have any thoughts, or if we're just tuning our signal, like tuning our radio to pick up what's out there, and then depending on the frequency you're on, that's gonna translate into what your thoughts are with your own specific lens and flair to things. But I know when I'm not vibing high based on like the thoughts that are coming through to me, like the channeling. We all channel all the time. I just think of thoughts as channels.
Yeah.
So like when I know, and I can tell clearly when I do a lot of driving, and when I'm driving and those thoughts aren't good, I'm like, damn, dude, I am tuned to like a pretty low frequency right now. Yeah. Like that's okay, because I am not my thoughts.
Right.
So like how do I just work on them? I'm not going to like judge myself, and I will. You go through that too sometimes. Then you pull out, you go, oh wait.
Right.
This is not who I am. Who cares? Just don't act on these things, because that's what a real manifestation is. It's not just thinking about the things. They say like God helps those who help themselves too. You have to put like your best foot forward. You have to take a step toward that thing to then say, okay, I'm actually looking to make this happen. And every magic ritual is about that. It's just not about doing the ritual. And part of the ritual is that you're actually doing something towards that end, which is what makes it powerful. And I think one should be very wise as to which rituals they follow, and understanding what these things actually are. And like, why can't you develop your own ritual? Just develop your own ritual. You're a powerful divine being. Like, make your own rituals of what you want to do with things, just as valid as anything else. A lot of times when you do these rituals that other people have been doing, you're tapping into those energies, right? Those energy imprints that are left over. I didn't know those people, to my knowledge. I don't know what's going on there. Do I want to do that? Like, I don't know. Probably not. Why can't I just have the confidence in myself to say, I'm going to come up with my own ritual here?
Yeah. Yeah, totally. I mean, talk about that on, like different, like, whatever. I don't know the words, but like, I like Kali Ma, and things like that. And, I like goddesses and like learning about them, but that doesn't mean like I necessarily have to do like a ritual for them or a ritual towards them or a worshiping about that, right? It doesn't have to be about worship. It's just, embodying something, but, not necessarily like doing like a worship to anything.
Yeah. Or just having an interest in that thing, like say Kali Ma, and sitting there and spending time to learn about it and think about what this imagery means to you is doing a ritual. I mean, you're putting your prana into that thing. You're figuring out what it means too.
Yeah.
I always like to say as well, like all the planets in like the astrological chart, they're all represented by like different deities and gods and myth, and all these deities and gods are very imbalanced energies. Like you say, like they call Jupiter the Great Benefic, right? Like, oh, it doesn't really matter where it is a chart; it's always carrying this great energy, right? And Jupiter represents Zeus, but Zeus raped a lot,
Right.
like in the myths, is an imbalanced energy of there. Like Mercury, Hermes, that's an imbalanced energy. It's an archetype. Right. And if you're living fully in that energy and archetype, you are by definition imbalanced. It's bringing all of them in. It's becoming the whole zodiac wheel. It's understanding what the goddesses mean and gods mean and bringing them all into yourself and then calling on them at the appropriate times to bring them in. But when you see people like doing so many, like, to me, in my mind, when I see people doing like a lot of rituals to a certain thing, it's like, man, that seems like a really imbalanced energy that's going on here. You're really trying to pull that in. And then when you see some of our social rulers doing rituals to certain energies,
it's like, what are they bringing in?
And they're bringing in, and then we're watching it, we're adding to it. Like, to me, like Super Bowl shows and the Olympics is coming up, so that'll be a big spectacle. Think of all that prana and energy that's going towards that ritual that they're doing on stage, and just like start to be aware of the symbology that's going on. It's not by accident that there's a ton of symbology that's going on there. A lot of these things are to Saturn, to be honest with you. And so there's nothing wrong with Saturn, but the lower expression of Saturn, the more controlling nature of it.
Right.
And that I understand that's like a hard leap for people to make who've been living like the normie life that things are the way they are.
Yeah. Well, I like to think of it too. And let's just say, for instance, like, Taylor Swift, let's just say, okay, like somebody like really popular, and let's just say they're doing a show, Super Bowl. And I've seen things like, like they're dressed in this color. They're doing things that symbolize. Well, I look at it as, and maybe some people are like, I look at like, let's just say Taylor Swift dressed in red and did like some kind of symbol or something, right? That was more Saturnian or whatever.
Yeah.
Maybe she's unaware that she's doing that.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? It's not like these people are actually like the evil people, or like they are the Illuminati, right? Yeah. But like, who knows who influenced them to dress that way, or they're like, I'll wear this outfit. Like, I don't know. It's just like, it's not just like, oh, this person is evil. Like, we all do things that we are unaware of. It's just about becoming aware of the things and seeing things, right? And not like, oh, that person's evil, but like, and I can't even say like, okay, these people have like a, whatever, people who dress them, costume designers, maybe it's not even the costume designer. It's, I mean, it could, you don't know where the control is coming from, and it gets spread out. And then that is used to infiltrate who's watching.
The masses.
Yeah, who's watching.
Yeah, well, you just don't get anywhere by like judging people and calling them evil and doing anything like that. You just become aware of it. Like, who cares if it's them or... To me, it's pretty obvious. Like, we have this celebrity worship culture that goes on, and we have this idea that the cream rises to the top. So these are truly the most talented. No, they're not. They're handpicked. There's plenty of talented people out there. Something like YouTube shows you that. Her voice, she isn't a better performer and have a better voice. She doesn't even write her own fucking songs. Someone's write those songs most of the time. Yeah. So it like, these people are kind of like handpicked to a degree, and maybe they're not aware of that. Like there's also the term useful idiots, which isn't a judgment, but that's an actual term for people who just do the bidding, right? Or there's puppets, or just people who are just kind of going along with what they do because that's what they want their life. Who cares? Right. It doesn't matter. Even the people who are quote unquote evil and the social programmers that are running things, I don't hate them either. They're doing what they think they need to do, or maybe they truly think that this is what has to happen to save the world because we're too populated in their mind. So we need to. This is an ends that justifies the means, or whatever it is. Like, it doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, no one's holding a gun to your head to participate in any of this. Yeah. Like, what we'll say is, well, if I want this life that I want to live, then I have to do these things, and I feel compelled to do these things. Well, they're the ones that told you that this is the type of life to live, and you have to get yourself right with that. Like, the American dream was a scam.
And that's your choice, too. Like, it's your choice.
It's your choice.
Just as it's my choice, right? To have this house, and have a mortgage, right? Like, that was my choice to do that, you know? So, like, I have to, support that And that's a choice too. It's not like it's me being forced to do it. I am choosing, because I could sell this house and, live in something much less. I would still have to have a job, right? But I could live in I don't even, I could probably find a trailer, right? And spend a lot less money and, and nothing against people who own trailers either. I just don't want to live that way.
Yeah.
So that's my choice. These are choices that we all make and what we are okay with doing.
Yeah.
And then I'm at a point in my life where I'm questioning this now. Do I really want this? And and I don't. So I'm looking at okay, well then how do I escape it? How do I make the steps of getting out of it?
Yeah. That's all we can do.
Yeah.
I do the same thing with my debt and student loan. Man, it took me a while to even though I was always skeptical, I still did the things and bought in the system. All right, now how do I get out of it? It took this, until about Saturn's return, maybe the first 30 years is programming. And then the next is figuring out that you've been programmed and how to deprogram. But you're not going to get anywhere by thinking it's impossible. You can't be done. It can always be done.
Yeah.
It can always be done. There's always a way out of it. But when you get into hopelessness and depression, your field of possibilities and potentials really starts to limit. And that's the work of the mind, is to recognize when you go there, let it pass, pull yourself out of it. And then all of a sudden, these ideas start popping up, or this person who understands the legal system for the people comes out, or all these different things. But that requires searching on your part, and searching requires being hopeful and optimistic, and just knowing that the light wins. The light always wins. That doesn't have to win in our lifetime, but it's the battle's already done. The light wins. Who knows where we are in the process of that? But
that's interesting.
To
think we're in the process. Well, I thought it was interesting that you came back to Saturn's return, and that's where we started. I mean, basically the conversation. And I think we're at hour 40. So maybe that's a good time to disconnect. And I think it was a good conversation. And I would bet that people be you guys need to come back on and talk about more things.
I think it's a pretty good representative, just a conversation we have whenever I come back on the weekends or whatever anyway. So.
Well, there's so many times where we'll talk and I'll be damn it, where's my microphone? I need to push record, because there's such good conversations that we have. And I've said this before too. I mean, I have great friends and great support. We have good conversations, but I just never have, as deep conversations as I do about multiple things as you. And, I'll take a lot of your information that you tell me to back to my friends, and they're your brother said that, well, ask him about this, what this means. And, so.
That's, to me, that's just the beauty of everyone plays a role. We're all just gears in the same system. I wouldn't have the liberties to dive into so many things, of which I'm not an expert in anything. I have just a smattering of knowledge. And oftentimes it's a oh shit, I was off on that. Now I have to throw that away. But I live in a 100 square foot tiny house where the internet shuts off at 8 o'clock every night, and I don't have any cell phone service, and I don't have children. So I don't have all these other responsibilities.
Yeah.
And I just also happen to have a very obsessive mind when I'm curious about something. So I can just go deep. So that's that's my gear in the system. Other people have to. You said you bought into this house, but this house gave me a place to stay for a year when I moved here. Yeah, so that's just it's all part of it. Everyone plays a role.
Yeah, and I love it because my mind is pulled in so many directions with work, kids, house, all these things, and I want to learn a lot of things, and I do what I can to learn. And I'll when I see you, I talk about all the things, and then you'll come across something and send me a video. You think about me and send me that video, and I usually listen to almost everything you send me, and maybe I don't get through everything or whatever, but I always try because I know when you send me something that there's a reason why you're sending it. So,
and I don't always know what that reason is.
Yeah, maybe not.
I'll be I'll just think to send it to you.
Yeah, and that's great. Because it's okay, well, I have something to listen to besides whatever bullcrap that I listen to, but not all of it's bullcrap. But anyway, just always appreciate it, and how much my knowledge has grown and how much my journey has been pushed forward, and I believe in the direction that I need it to go, has been because of you and because of us just always being in each other's lives, but just, I think when we really needed each other, like or at least I can say when I needed you, like that's when we just have become so close. And like I said, it just has pushed me a lot out of my fears and understanding, and just for, my personal spiritual growth.
Yeah. Well, it's been an honor. And I also know that sometimes it's like my theories and philosophy on thing is that, everyone has to go through the dark forest and you have to do it alone. So like, sometimes it's like, all right, well, I'm going to nudge you.
Yeah.
Here, it's going to suck for a while. I don't know how you're going to come out of it. I mean, everyone comes out of it, if you keep going, but sometimes people turn around. They keep going. So that's always like a thing on this journey. It's like, oh, I'm here for support, but like, okay, you got to like let go of the hand now, just like it was done to me. That's how it was always. I've always had these almost Saturnian figures in my life in the positive way that were very caring about me, but also very no nonsense and no bullshit. And those people have always pushed me forward and said, hey, what are you doing? Get your shit together. Like, go this way. Yeah. Or like, you got to start your trek and you got to figure it out. And it's like, okay, I guess I got to do that then.
Yeah.
So then you just try to be that person for other people.
Yeah. No, and I appreciate it. Yeah. I just had listen to a tarot, and it was saying something like a family member is like an emperor in your life. And it was saying something like they're going to, and who knows if this comes true, and who knows who it is. And, obviously this tarot reading wasn't just for me, but it was saying that they're going to step away, and you're going to be like, or me, right, will be like, oh, how do I handle that?
Yeah. That's how you learn that you can handle things.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's funny. The first three, this will be the last thing I say. The first 3 tarot cards that were ever pulled for me were just kind of like random. It was through Melissa. And she had just like started with doing tarot stuff. She's like, you mind doing this? Like, I want practice. I'm like, sure. And the first 3 cards, we just did past, present, future. The past was the Hermit, and the present was Temperance, and then the future was Emperor. And I was like, okay. That's nice. And I didn't take that at that time at that moment. I took it, oh, this is like life here. And obviously the Hermit is very important to me. I have a giant tattoo of the Hermit card on me. It's like an archetype that I go to a lot. Temperance is always my issue, right? But that represents like patience in the middle path and like reprieve before getting back into the other things. But like, I like the idea that the Emperor is in my future, even though it scares me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I remember when she did my tarot cards, and the real takeaway I had it, she said that, that she pulled the Sun for me, and she said the Sun is the greatest card that you can get out of the deck. And she said, no matter which path or which way you decide to go, like the Sun is there for you, and I remember thinking, okay, well, fuck it. I'm just going to fuck it up and just end up with the Sun, which, maybe not, but.
Well, it's the same, like, why have fear?
Right.
And of course we do, because we meet ourselves at our growth's edge all the time. And if you can remember, oh yeah, the Sun.
Like, that does actually stick in my head a lot. Like, I think like, no matter what you do, Tiffany, like you're going to end up okay.
Yeah. And fear ruins lives.
Yeah.
Absolutely it does. It's not to say there's not empathy for it. We all experience it, but it ruins lives.
Yeah.
Totally.
I mean, fear is the mind killer.
Fear is the mind killer, yeah. Dune. Yeah. Good Dune reference.
Yeah. I never even saw the Dune. I never saw the movie. It's just Dune, right? It's not that Dune. I never even saw it, but I just like that. I like that saying. I don't even know that was even like an actual saying in Dune.
Yeah, it's like an important part in the book. Yeah.
All right. Well, next time when I have Brian on, Brian the Emperor, we'll come back on and we'll talk about some more things. And I don't mean that like I wasn't trying to mean that as like making fun of you. I mean it as
I didn't take it that way.
My face was like, okay. But,
I was thinking, I was like, oh, I should say my podcast.
Oh yeah, do that. But wait, let me say first, I meant the Emperor but I mean, you just bring a lot of knowledge, and that has been the biggest thing that has opened my mind up, is the knowledge that you have brought to me, and that, has opened up many different avenues. And anyway, but yes, I brought that on here for you to talk about your podcast and where people can listen to you.
Cool. Yeah. So I have a podcast called 8th from the 8th, and that is the letter 8, TH from the 8th. Same thing. And so I think it's on Spotify, or you can just go to the website 8thfromthe8th.com. It was originally called Memento Mori, And then we kind of changed it because we thought we were being clever, and that memento mori was this like Latin term of remember you die that people didn't know. But then we started talking about people, and I'd say memento mori, and they're like, oh yeah, I know what that is. We're like, well, this is kind of taking the kind of
the
that
mystery,
the effect out of the thing that gets people like interested and engaged. Plus, there was like 8 other podcasts called that. So yes, we went from eighth from the 8th. We have like 6 episodes out. We've been on a super long break, which is my fault because I went into the woods. But we'll get back to it shortly.
Yeah, and just one more thing I want to say is, I remember when we were talking today, and I thought this before, like, how are we siblings? We're so different, similar but so different, right? And even with the podcast, like, I think that's what's interesting, right? Like, I have my own podcast to talk about my things. You have your own podcast, talk about very different things. And then it would be nice, to come back once in a great while to, bring our thoughts together,
Yeah. No, I agree. I've had that same thought, and that's interesting. Yeah. So you talk about your stuff, and we talk about ours. And then when you and I get together, it's like, oh yeah, we've been talking about, we're going to talk about sovereignty next. And all of a sudden we're going to have Daniel on, hopefully.
Oh, nice.
And like, to bring that in, like, oh, okay, what are some things you've been talking about? What are some things you've been talking about? Because I try to listen to your podcast, but I get like enamored with a bunch of other
I get it
things too. So it's like nice to come in.
Yeah, and I don't ever take anything personal. Like, my podcast isn't going to be for everybody, or maybe people don't want to like hear what I have to say on something.
Oh yeah, that's not true though, because when I did like listen to it, I was like, oh shit, this is like really, not like I was surprised, but I was like, this is really good. Nice. I'm engaged, I'm interested, because I remember I was like working one day and I decided, but like every time I drive down, I'm like, fuck, I didn't listen to this podcast this week. So I've been listening to fucking, ridiculous lectures about whatever.
Your podcast. I haven't listened to all your episodes. I've listened to here and there. It's just if it's on my mind. Yeah. So
I think the funny difference is like, this isn't good to say, but I'm like, I don't really want people to listen to it.
Well, I don't like, I want people to listen to my podcast if they want to, but I'm always like, kind of like when I put my podcast out, I'm always like, I go back and edit it a little bit, not much. Yeah. And I'll hear my voice and I'm like, oh my God, I sound so cringy. Oh my God. Like I'm talking so fast or, and I'm always like, oh, what are people going to think about me? And then now I'm to the point where I'm like, I really don't fucking care. Listen to it. Don't listen to it. Whatever, I do not care.
I had that moment recently because we talked about some things in our last interview and we got a little feedback of like, oh, that could have been said a little different, or maybe that was insensitive. And I thought about it and I was like, yeah, fuck that. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm not going to be an apologist here. This is the whole thing. Yeah. I might say things that are sloppy. And when I go back to, I'm like, no, I really didn't. Like, that was like a true expression of like what I think about what's going on here. But it's like, if you bag on like wokeism, which happens to be like a leftist thing right now, then the assumption is the right. So you better make sure to bag on the right too. Like, don't worry, I will. That's just not the topic du jour right now.
I don't know if I ever even said this, but like I am of no party.
Yeah, same.
I'm of party of Tiffany.
Yeah.
I am committed. Both have good points, both have bad points. Like, I just don't care. Yeah. And that's just the way I
mainly as bad point.
Well,
two wings of the same, the same eagle.
Yeah, no, I agree. We'll talk about that. We'll definitely come back on and talk about that. Yeah. But I am not really a side to anything. I'm definitely when they talk about black and white. Yeah, I try to be as gray as I can be.
No teams.
Yeah.
And anything, I just feel like that life is a constant funneling of trying to get you to be on a team.
Yeah.
It's like no teams or team everyone.
Yeah.
Like team one, team all.
Yeah.
I would say team human, and then people would be like, well, these people aren't humans. Like, well, it doesn't matter. Yeah. Everyone comes from like the all.
Dogs. Or the dogs.
I
want to be on the team with the dogs too.
Oh, so, yeah, dude.
Team souls or something.
Team every living thing in existence. Yeah. But no teams. And in fact, when a team gets formed, I get very skeptical. Okay. And that's like always been a thing. Like, I won't even put on the gi in jiu-jitsu, because I'm like, I won't be in your cult.
Yeah.
And wear like the uniform and pajamas, which is a ridiculous stance to take, but I can't get it out of me. Yeah.
Oh, I hear you. I have no choice. I have to put my uniform on every day. And, it's funny because the other day I looked at it as, I have to put you on to go to work. This is going to be the last thing I say. Yep. I have to put you on to go to work. And I was like looking at it like, and I thought, let me change my mindset, like I'm going to put this on, and I know I'm putting on like, I'm putting something on to go do something. This is just an outfit that I'm putting on for me to do a part of my day, but it doesn't change how I want my day to go, even though I don't want to do this and I don't want to go here. And it's it's freaking dark gray. I work with people who are not in good health, and
it's really interesting. The colors you choose.
Like, I didn't choose it. I was told I had to wear gray, but I'm like, we should be freaking dressed as the damn rainbow, but like, we're like little, like Grim Reapers, but whatever.
The rainbow is other kind. Has other connotations now too.
But it's like, it's like this Grim Reaper color, but whatever.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's like a drab color, but whatever. But I thought when I put it on, like, don't let this uniform though. Like,
be conscious you're wearing it. And I think about that, like when I was a punk rocker in my youth, the whole point of punk rock was to be like outside of the system and to not be part of like the uniform wearing and the Walking Dead and all this stuff. And then you're like, but I'm wearing a uniform now.
Yeah.
I got my hair I have a mohawk or Liberty Spikes, and I got my dog collar, and I got the anarchy written on me, and I got all this stuff, and go, this is another fucking uniform.
Yeah.
You cannot avoid wearing uniforms because we have to wear clothes for whatever reason. And you're always going to be like representing something. I think you just be conscious.
Oh yeah, I mean, I am starting to dress a little bit like a Fruit Loop when I go out. I put my I have a fanny pack that has cat faces on it.
Oh, nice.
And I'm just like, I'm just gonna start like rocking just some like weird ass shit, and like.
Oh, be careful! You don't wear the hipster uniform then.
Yeah. Well.
Just kidding.
No, I mean, because I get it, right? Like, but I just want to wear whatever the hell I want.
Yeah, whatever I want. My expression of me today.
Yeah, like
I like the idea. Wearing my like crazy like Alan Watts hoodie on one day, and like I love wearing like a suit the next or something.
Yeah. It's not like I want to always be a Fruit Loop, and I don't even think it's being a Fruit Loop. It's just kind of like
it's all out there.
Yeah, just look. I mean, it is kind of like, look at that crazy person over there dressed like that, And I'm like,
it's often very inspiring, though.
Yeah, it kind of is.
I mean, my podcast host, my former roommate, I mean, that's what I get from him all the time. Like everyone talks about like giving no fucks, whatever. He literally doesn't, and not in a way where he has to say it. He just like legitimately just lives in his own world and does what he wants. And we were having like a yard sale one time, and I woke up late, and he was already out there like in the early morning. He's like this tall, lanky dude with like long hair, and he's wearing his like fanny pack and his like little short shorts and stuff like that. And he wasn't like trying to wear a persona. That's just like what he felt like wearing. And he's just like the happiest, most positive person ever.
He really is.
It's just funny, dude. Yeah.
All right.
Well, it
was good talking to you.
Yep.
And I'll be back with another episode eventually. We'll see what we talk about next. All right. Bye.